Another year has gone by, and we find ourselves once again sitting on the floor, our shoes off, the lights low. We're lower than we normally are, closer to the ground. There is an avodah to be done today. For the next few hours, at least until Chatzos in Halacha, it is very clear there is nothing else that we can focus on. We have nowhere to go, nothing to do, not to eat, and just focus. And the reason that the Halacha tells us that is not chas v'shalom to punish us, but to make us aware, to force us to grasp the opportunity, the obligation that we have for the next few hours. And the avodah is to strip away all the externals, the things that we associate ourselves with, and to look inwards and to mourn. And it's not always easy. There are different types of avelus, Chazal tell us, avelus yishona, avelus chadosha, and today we actually have both. Let's try and focus on one word which Chazal, which the Torah uses to capture the enormity of what happened to us in the past and is continuing to happen to us to this very day. The word that Yirmiyah Hanavi uses to open Megillas Eicha, when he reaches for words and words seem to fail, he just has one word, Eicha. How can this be? Eicha is not a question that expects an answer. It is a gasp, it is a shock, a horror. It is what comes out of a person when the floor beneath him gives way, when everything he thought he could rely on has gone. It is the sound of discovering that the things that you thought would always be there have gone. And all of us know that sound in some way, shape or form, perhaps not in the same way, perhaps not with the same pain, but each of us have had moments when life stopped making sense. A diagnosis, a phone call, a betrayal, a loss, pain, a marriage under strain, a future that we thought was certain suddenly disappearing. And Eicha is the word that we reach for when the sentence we had written up for life is torn in front of our eyes. And on Tisha B'Av, all of us say that word together, Eicha. How can this be? Think about the things, each of us in our own lives, that simply cannot happen. We all have a private little cupboard inside our heart, which is, it's labeled impossible. You cannot think of waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that the country that you trusted is gone, that the institutions that promised to protect you will simply stand aside. We couldn't have thought of a situation of the whole world locking its doors and remaining indoors because of a virus until it happens, and then the unimaginable becomes ordinary. You can't imagine living in 1929 and having your stocks and shares and having a future, and overnight everything being wiped out. Can't imagine living in Western civilized democracy and thinking that the horrible, tragic, impossible events of 80 years ago We were certain that these things belonged in the past, and we wake up and we discover it's happening right here, right now. The impossible is happening. The Beis Hamikdash was not just another building. It was the place where heaven touched earth. It was Hashem's own house. Yirmiyah Hanavi had promised Chizkiah, Yerushalayim will hold. The city had survived before, surely it would survive again. You cannot burn down Hashem's house. You cannot uproot the place from where the Shekhinah shines into the world. It cannot be. And then Yirmiyah watches the smoke. He walks through the streets, which only a short time earlier had been full of life, commerce, children, song, kedusha, and now there was silence, hunger, death. The sound of enemies where the sound of the trumpets of the Leviim had been heard. He saw the impossible with his own eyes, and he cried, Eicha. How can it be that the Jews of Spain, who for hundreds of years had contributed to the golden age of Spain, its philosophers, its bankers, its scholars, its philosophers, its doctors, and on the 8th of Av they are ordered, 1492, this is the last day that you are welcome in Spain, and on the 9th they are already hunting them in the streets. And in one day we go to being homeless and hunted. How can it be the boats, the deserts, the families torn apart, the ones who stayed and were burnt by the Inquisition, the ones who fled and drowned at sea? How can it be crusades, pogroms, tachvatat, blood libels, ghettos, blamed for the plague, blamed for poisoning wells, blamed for the blood of children, blamed always for whatever fear a society could not bear to face and see in itself? How can it be that 100 years passes and we're still not home? 200, 500, 1,000, and nearly 2,000. How can it be? The trains, the selections, the smoke, the ash, a third of our people gone in the lifetime of men and women, many of us know. Not ancient history, living memory. And how can it be? And this one, we don't need to reach back centuries to find this one. It is still open inside us that on an ordinary Simchas Torah morning, on the 7th of October, Eicha, how can it be that the walls came down? The fences, the cameras, the fortifications, the army posts, the whole line that had been built and was trumpeted as being the very latest in high-tech surveillance to keep Jewish families safe. And within hours it was trampled, and murderers, barbarians poured through, hunting people in their homes, their cars, at a festival in the same rooms, in safe rooms that were no longer safe. We said in Eicha Tovu Ba'oretz Sha'areha, Yirmiyah's words, the gates sunk into the earth, the very gates meant to protect us, swallowed by the ground. I remember the feeling of that day, I think we all do. The first reports, the disbelief, the desperate hope that the numbers were wrong, the sickening discovery that every update was worse than the last, and the question rising again and again, Eicha, how was this possible? How could this be happening? How could it be happening now? There is a word in English that sits very close to Eicha. Disillusionment. Listen to the word, disillusion, to be broken out of an illusion. That means that something painful. It means that before the shattering, we were living inside a story that was not entirely true. We believed we were safe. We believed certain lines would hold. We believed there were things that the world had learnt, hatreds it had buried, crimes it would never again excuse. We believed that some horrors had moved from possibility into history. Disillusionment hurts because it doesn't just take away our comfort, it forces us to see what was already there. Eicha is the moment the covering tears and the truth, uncertain underneath, becomes visible. So here's the question we need to deal with today. Not only what broke, but what was that illusion? What is the truth beneath it that we keep refusing to see? What is the truth that Hashem had to teach us again and again, century after century, churban after churban? And here the medrash comes in. It's a famous medrash, but I'd like to expand upon it. And the medrash tells us, and it's not merely a play on words, that the word Eicha is written with the same letters as another word in the Torah. Read those 4 letters differently, and they say, Ayeka. Where are you? And where do we first hear Ayeka? Not in a Megillas Eicha, not in a book of destruction, but right back at the very beginning of the human story in Gan Eden. Adam HaRishon has eaten from the tree, and then he hides. What did he want? The Nachash says to him, clearly, eat from the tree, your eyes will open, and you will be, you will be like Hashem. You will decide good and evil for yourself. You will become the measure of reality. You will become the center. And the moment that Adam tries to become the center, he hides. He hears Hashem's voice moving through the garden, and he hides among the trees, because a human being who has made himself the center of the world cannot comfortably stand before the one who is truly the center of everything. And then Hashem calls out to him, Ayeka. Of course, Hashem knows exactly where he is standing. He knows the trees, he knows the leaves, he knows the exact place. The question is not geographical. Ayeka means, where are you now? What has happened to you? What have you become? You were created as one soul. You were whole. You were made to receive my light and to carry it into the world. You were made to live in relationship with me, with another human being, with creation, and you traded all of that to become sovereign over your own little universe. You chose your own eyes as the final judge of what is good and what is bad. You made yourself the center instead of using the incredible koiches that I gave you, the brilliance to recognize me and to serve me. You made yourself the center. Ayeka, where are you now? And I think we all need to hear that question personally. Ayeka, where am I? Where am I when I daven? Where am I when I speak to another person? Where am I when I am offended? Where am I when I know that I should apologize, but my ego refuses to let me? And where am I when I'm so busy defending my own position that I no longer hear the pain in someone else's voice? And these 2 words now go together. Ayeka in Gan Eden, where are you? And Eicha on the floor of the Churban, how can it be? The same letters. And the Medrash is telling us that they're one cry. Our tears over Yerushalayim and Hashem's question to Adam comes from the same wound. The Churban did not begin when Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls. It began when the first human being stepped out of relationship and into self. It began when the I became more important than we, and when my desire became more authoritative than Hashem's word. So the tears that we cry for Yerushalayim today are in some sense the tears that Hashem cried over Adam in the garden. And the Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us that this word, as we know in Torah, nothing is zufällig, nothing is by chance. The gematria of Eicha and Ayeka is 36. There were 36 hours of light at the beginning of creation, where man was able to see things as they were, and then it became hidden. We'll return to that. And there is another word. In the Shurim and Pirkei Avos, we spoke about, in the name of the Maharal, the 2 events that frame these Bein HaMetzorim, that force us back into Mitzrayim, because the Geula was not complete. There was the Egel at the beginning, on the 17th of Tammuz, 2448, and then there is the Meraglim a year and a month later. And here we find a connection to this word in another way, but it brings the whole thing together. The Maharal tells us that the Egel, of course, was, in many senses, was worse, but it was still recoverable. It was possible to get back to the situation of Matan Torah. But when the Meraglim happened, something happened that closed that door forever. And from that moment on, we would always be forced, Bein HaMetzorim, back, as it were, forced to look back towards Mitzrayim, because the Golus wasn't finished. And this is what we want to uncover in a little bit more depth now. 40 days. Just 40 days after we stood at Har Sinai, we heard Anochi, and I'll return to that, the greatest revelation of all time. Hashem stripped away everything. And he showed us that behind all the different things that we see in the world, fragmentation, multiple different forces and ideas, but the truth is there is a single entity. There is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is behind everything. And the Kabbalah Sfarim tell us this is, I can't help but mention it here because it plays directly into this. The word Elohim, that Ibn Ezra asks, is a very strange word to use for a single God. We say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, there is only one. Well, if there is only one, how come I have a word that is in the plural, Elohim, and that word is also used by judges. Dayanim are also called Elohim. You would think it's a strange word to use, and the pshat is, the real meaning is, Elohim means the challenge of identifying the single unifying force behind all the multiplicity of things that we see in the world. Wind, fire, nuclear power, sun, everything. They look as if they're pulling in different directions, but the truth is there is one thing that holds behind it all. Behind the Asora Ma'amoros, there is one, and that is the challenge of Elohim. Elohim is also Gematria HaTeva, as they say, but the Kabbalah Sfarim take it deeper, and they say, together with the Novi, Su'u Maroi Meinechem, lift your eyes up to the heavens, Uru'u, Mi Bara Eile. Who created Eile? 36, Eile. So in Gematria, Zayeka and Eicha. Have a look and see. The challenge of Elohim is Eile and Mi. Mi Bara Eile. Once in our history we saw this on Eichi. But 40 days later, the nation points to a lump of gold and they say words that are still hurtful. Eile Elohecha Yisrael. These are your gods, Israel. Eile. The word in the plural. It's a single golden calf, but they say Eile. You can't say Eile about one thing. Its very grammar is fragmentation. 40 days later, they were pointing at the many. And between the Egel and Churban, there is one more collapse. And this gives birth to Tisha B'Av, as we said, the Meraglim, that fateful night. When Moshe retells the story at the end of his life in Sefer Devarim, he tells us not only that the people sinned, he says something very fascinating. He tells us that it was important for us to realize where the sin took place. Vateirognu ba'oholechem. You rebelled against Hashem in your tents. You went back to your tents. Each family behind its own canvas. Each person inside his own private space. And there, away from Moshe, away from the camp, away from the shared memory of Kriyas Yamsuf and Matan Torah, you told yourself a different story. And here we hear, for the first time, the very first sinas chinam, the first unbelievable, wicked, tragic story that we told ourselves. We said, and I quote, Besinas Hashem oisonu, hoitzi oisonu, because Hashem hates us, he took us out of Egypt. And that is the first sinas chinam. How ridiculous to tell yourself that Hashem took us out and all the miracles and everything he did was because he hates us. That is the first sinas chinam. And where does it take place? It takes place in our oihel. That word oihel that was meant to be the place where Hashem, the oihel moyed, is meant to be a place of revelation. Bilam looks and sees Matoivu, Oihalecha Yaakov, and we took that brocha of Oihel and we turned it into the source of Churban. Vateirognu ba'alechem, we rebelled in our tents and we said, Besinas Hashem Oisanu. Because a tent can become ego with walls around it. Instead of standing together in the open, focusing on Hashem, we focused on ourselves. And again, 36, that Oihel turned round from being the Matoivu Alecha Yaakov, from being the possibility of Oihel Moed, of being the bracha of the Oihelim, of the Ovos and the Imois HaKadoshim, and instead it became the place where we rebelled and we revealed the fear and the darkness inside our own hearts. Vateirognu ba'alechem, and we rebelled in our oihel, in our tents, and we said, Hashem hates us. And that's how Tisha B'Av is born. So 4 collapses, all revolving around the same number. Ayeka, the 36th, Ayeko in the garden, human being hide, and fragmentation starts. The Eile Elohecha of the Egel, the corruption of Oihel of the Meraglim, and then Eicha, the cry over a world torn apart by that fragmentation. But let's, although it's not Chatzos yet, and we haven't even started saying the Kinnos, but we also have to find the way out. And the way out is Anochi. The way out is the revelation that we witnessed and we saw with clarity that there is only one HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it occurred to me that if we're already along down this path, there is the way back from the 36 of Eicha and of Ayeka and of Eile Elohecha to get back to that Gilui of Anochi. What the difference, it cannot be coincidental. The difference is the very gematria of Odom, of Ma. 36 and 45 make 81 of Anochi. The 36 tzaddikim as well. 36 hidden tzaddikim. That light which Hashem showed the world for the first 36 hours and then he hid it. More Rav Tuvcha shetzofantoli reyecha. More is Odom. 45. More Rav Tuvcha, the greatness which you hid. And now the greatness and the light that still exists, but it is hidden and we have to uncover it. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "V'nachnu ma." He says about himself and Aaron. He doesn't see fragmentation. 2 brothers who loved each other and gave each other space, and they lived up to what it means to be Odom. The Shloach Kodesh says an incredible thing. He says the reason that there is no churban, that there is no avelus on Shabbos, is because by engaging in avelus, what we are doing today is that we are putting down the foundations and we are beginning the building and the rebuilding of a future Beis HaMikdash. And he goes so far as to say, B'derech Drush, of course, but the Shla Kodesh says that this is binyan, this is boina in the most profound sense, and therefore it can have no place on Shabbos. The second Beis HaMikdash, the one whose absence that we are mourning, the one we're still waiting to see rebuilt, was destroyed, as we know, Chazal tell us, because of sinas chinam. And this needs some understanding. A bechia shel chinam. We spoke about the bechia, it was ba'or lechem. And generations later, the Beis HaMikdash falls for the same reason, a causeless hatred. But what does that really mean? Every year we try and say a pshat, not always a different pshat or a same pshat. But there is one very simple explanation which I think rings true. When we say that it has no reason, it doesn't mean chinam means that there's no reason. The baselessness is the self that places itself at the center. If I place me at the center of the universe, then everything that happens, I see it through my own lens. The absence of proportion, the absence of humility, the absence of another person's humanity. And then I stop looking at the person that is next to me, and that's what we need to do. Disillusionment, the Ayeko, it tells us that everything we thought was true isn't. And on this day, as we begin the avodah of working back towards a Yomim Neiroim, let's not forget that. This is an integral part of it. Let's stop putting ourselves at the center of everything. Every community has its tensions. Every family has disappointments. Every shul has people that irritate one another. We spend a great deal of time talking about Achdus in the Jewish people as if it's some great project for New York or Yerushalayim or London or Bnei Brak, but Achdus begins in this room. Sitting on the floor together in our WhatsApp groups, at our Kiddush. It's the way we speak when the person is not there. It's whether we allow one mistake to become somebody's entire identity, and we need, I speak to myself, of course, need to stop thinking so much about myself. Because as long as I'm thinking like Adam Arishan, that I am the center of the universe, then the Rabbeinu Shalom will keep smashing me and telling me, forcing me again and telling to me, Ayeko, where are you? And I will have to sit again on the floor and cry, Eicha, how on earth could this happen? I want to say something a bit harsh. There's very few days in the year that you can do that. I came across something which at first I checked out for myself because I simply did not believe that it was true. Not long after the 7th of October, well, it was long, it was a year or two later, but Amnesty International wrote a report of nearly 300 pages. And it's called Israel's Genocide. The word that had to be invented to describe what was done to us, to our grandparents. And this, I quote directly, is the exact opening sentence of this 300-page report. On the 7th of October 2023, Israel embarked on a military offensive on the occupied Gaza Strip of unprecedented magnitude, scale, and duration. Unquote. In the story the world chose to tell, the 7th of October became the day Israel attacked. Not the day our daughters were hunted through fields, not the day babies were burned in homes, not the day grandmothers were dragged alive into tunnels, not the day families held doors shut with their bare hands while terrorists tried to break in. All of that disappears before the first sentence has even ended. The massacre is deleted, and in its place stands the accusation that the crime of the day was ours. And it was not one report, it was a wave. Within days of the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, before all the bodies had been identified, before families had buried their dead, the streets of great cities filled. Mobs threatened us on campuses, globalized the Intifada. I don't need to tell you, the oldest hatred on earth, the hatred that we were assured had died in the ashes of Auschwitz, stood up from its grave and roared, and it is roaring still. And we all thought, Eicha, no, this can't be happening here. Go back to Ha'azinu, and we see something amazing. Va'oiveinu pelilim, says Moshe Rabbeinu, our enemies are our judges. ICC, the ICJ, Amnesty International, those that judge us are oiveinu, they are our enemies. We're blamed and we'll keep being blamed because there is another Eicha. There's one more Eicha. And it's not in Megillas Eicha. And it appears in the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu in Ha'azinu. And he says, Eicha yirdoif echad elef ushnayim yonisu revava. How could one man chase 1,000? How could two put 10,000 to flight? Im loy kitzuram mchoram v'Hashem hisgiram. Eicha, how could it be that that wall just fell? That the unthinkable unfolded in front of our eyes? We need to also ask ourselves, Eicha, if it wasn't for the fact that Hashem is sending us a message again and again, if it was not for the fact that their rock had sold them. Rashi reads this as a proof. One person doesn't chase 1,000. If the impossible is unfolding before you, then the impossibility demands an explanation. No, says the Torah, a catastrophe so unnatural does not prove the absence of Hashem chas v'sholem. It proves that history is not running by itself. And the Torah demands of us more. The Torah demands of us better. And I want to finish this introduction. There's a lot more that can be said. But I want to finish this introduction with a Gemara in Brachas. And the Gemara, just to show that this play, this connection between Anochi and Eila that I made is not fanciful. It's not just remez, it's a Gemara. Yeshaya hears Tzion crying, Ozavani Hashem, Hashem Shchechoni. And the Klal Yisrael says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, perhaps you've forgotten me. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Anochi lo yashkachecha, I will never forget the Anochi. The Nasa v'nishma, that I will never forget. But gam eile tishkachna, I will forget the eile. The eile Elohecha. The Gemara clearly pivots one against the other. Hashem will choose to forget some things. He will choose when we do tshuva, when we hear the real cry of Eicha. When we ask ourselves, Ayeka, where are you? Eicha, how could the impossible keep happening to us again and again and again? And when we think it's destined to the history books, it starts again and is happening now. And until we stop putting ourselves at the center of the universe as individuals, and instead we take up the challenge of being Hashem's people, and that means caring for each other. That means creating connection, because we are brothers and sisters and we have a mission of being an Am Kodesh. And until we do that, we'll keep saying every few years, Eicha. And it's not getting better and it's not getting easier. History is speeding up as Hashem brings things to its conclusion. And says, Hashem, when you do that, when you remember the Anochi, and remember we got to Anochi by adding the Ma, the Odom, to the Eile, and you get that Anochi, then Gam Eile Tishkachna, I will forget the Eile. I'll forget the Eile Elohecha Yisrael, and then I will bring the Geula. That is just a Hakdama, maybe a bit longer than I thought it would be, but a Hakdama. Now we will start the first Kinah, and some of the Rabbanim will be speaking on the various Kinahs as we go through. Shavasu